crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I am here to share another mini slimline template using 12 by 12 paper. I'm going to pick a piece of 12 by 12 paper from this Hot Buy Michaels pattern paper pack by Craftsmith Co. Craftsmith Co. reached out to me and asked me if I was interested in them sending me a few paper pads and to see what I thought of them. I use a lot of paper pads, and I know a lot of you guys like to see ideas for things that you can get in stores. So this paper pad was gifted to me by Craftsmith Co. I am going to pick two papers, and then I'm going to mix them up. Each 12 by 12 piece of paper would be able to create 8 cards on its own. However, in particular, this pattern paper is pretty bold, and so I thought it would be good to kind of balance out some of these more bold elements by switching up the patterns. So I'll cut 2 pieces as per the template and then mix them up. What I'm doing with my hands here is I know I'm going to be cutting very small pieces of this pattern paper. So I'm using that to kind of gauge, like, how does a little tiny square of this big 12 by 12 paper work? Because often it's hard to imagine when you cut it up. I mean, we'll be cutting this into like 2.5 by 1.5 inch pieces, for example. So a little piece of it has to still make sense. And that was one way that I found that kind of helped my brain visualize it. The measurements, the template, telling you how to assemble this, how to cut this paper, are over on my blog. You can download a PDF so that you will know exactly what to do and you don't need to worry about the measurements that I'm making throughout the card. This template is going to be just a little bit finicky because there are quite a few pieces to cut. Ultimately, you're going to be cutting for each card 6 different pieces of paper and assembling them. However, I think layers like this really make a card feel like it's interesting and has some depth. So I will be matting all of my pieces of paper. You could do without that. I could see even choosing to mat some pieces of the paper and not others, and I think it would still look great. But I like the finished look of matting. It hasn't always been something that I've done, though. For a mini slimline card, I am using the 6 by 3 size. There are a couple of different sizes out there, but for me, this seemed to be the most popular size, so it's the one that I went with, and I'm going to be making my 6 by 6 card bases from 8.5 by 11 cardstock. This is not ideal because it leaves a lot of scraps. I would prefer to use 12 by 12 paper to cut these card bases because 12 by 12 would make 4 pieces of 6 by 6. However, it's been kind of difficult to source like thicker 12 by 12 cardstock. I can certainly find thinner solid cardstock, but I like a thick card base. I like the 110 pound from Michaels Recollection. I would love to see them do it in the 12 by 12 size and not just the 8.5 by 11. But to get around it, what I did was I picked 2 colors of card bases. So sometimes my card base is going to be this dark brown and sometimes it's going to be the Kraft color. Then I will do opposites. So if I'm going to be using a brown card base, then I will use the Kraft cardstock to cut my mats. There's still a lot of cardstock scraps. However, this, like all of my templates, produces no pattern paper scraps. So if you cut one piece of 12 by 12 paper, there will be nothing left and you'll make 8 cards. And that's true. So if this is the first one you've encountered, I've done this for slimline cards. I've done 1 5 by 7. I have more coming. I've done A2 size cards because those are my most popular. I have a lot of templates for those. And, just things that would work with various sizes. And my whole thing is about just not leaving you any scraps, because that was a problem that I came to as a crafter, where I loved using pattern paper and I did not like having scraps left over. And I often did a lot of things to get rid of them. Like you'll see on my channel, there's a lot of like, I'll use a whole 6x6 paper pad in one go. But I know those can be a little bit hard to follow along with. So I started creating some templates for you guys, and I hope that they've been helpful. Okay, so here what I'm doing is I'm cutting all of the mats that I will need. And in order to help myself out with this, I figure, okay, I'm going to be making 16 cards, but I'm only making 8 of each. So I need 8 copies of each set of mats, i.e. there are 3, each card has 3 1 3/4 by 2 3/4 mats. So I need 3 times 8 of that. And then I need 3 pieces that are like 3 1/4 by 1 inch, for example. So I'm just like, I'm calculating that all ahead of time, and I'm pre-cutting it, just like I did with the paper. I don't create templates to show you how to cut the cardstock just because I know people are using scraps a lot of times for that anyway, and it gets time intensive. So here's the basic outline of the card. There are these 3 rectangles in the back, and then there's a strip across the center. However, to make things easier, the strip that goes across the center, to make things no scrap and to fit well, the strip across the center is actually a piece that is cut in half. So it's a 3 by 3 1/4 inch piece of pattern paper matted on a 3 1/4 by 1 inch mat. And then I literally just took a scissor, chopped it in half, and I'm going to spread it out such that this like rectangle that goes in the middle covers that gap. And it will look like there's one long strip of pattern paper across the card, but in order to cut the paper to get no scraps, I can't make a big long strip like that. It would be kind of a funky size, and so this is my way around it. In order to make up for that though, because you're going to have, because there's that gap in the center there, if I were to try to tape it down, it would kind of like bump up on the edges where those pieces of paper and cardstock are. So I take a little bit of that scrap cardstock that I've been talking about, and I place it behind so that everything looks nice and smooth. Now, what I'm doing is I'm taking all of my pre-cut pieces of pattern paper, my pre-cut pieces of cardstock, my pre-cut card bases, etc., and I'm putting them all in a bag with my ATG, Advanced Tape Glider from Scotch, and now I can go craft anywhere. I can go craft downstairs watching TV with the family, or I can go outside and enjoy a nice sunny summer day. I could take it camping. I could take it, whatever. So I have all of that packaged up. And I like to do that a lot with my cards. It's kind of one of the advantage of being able to make multiples of a card. However, I am going to show you how I do things that I think add a personalized touch. So even though, again, I'm kind of mass assembling a lot of this, there are going to be ways that I make the cards special. Here, I have all of these little leftover strips of cardstock that were created when I was cutting the mats and I was cutting the card bases. I am taking 2 strips and gluing them together. This is 110-pound cardstock from Michaels. It's pretty thick stuff. 2 layers glued together creates fake foam tape. I don't like to buy foam tape because I'm cheap and because it's not good for the environment. It's not recyclable the way that cardstock and paper can be, or compostable, etc. So I generally try to avoid foam and plastic and that kind of thing on my cards. With that in mind, I glue the pieces of cardstock together, and I can put that behind and pop up my elements. I'm going to be cutting a bunch of word dies. Now, I could make all of my cards say the same thing, but that's actually going to take a lot more time, because if I only cut the hugs die every single time, then I have to pass it through my machine several times. There's 16 cards, so I'd have to pass the hugs die through my machine at least 16 times, and then 32 times if I want to make double layer, which is what I prefer. I prefer to cut at least 2 of the sentiment and glue them together. So I picked 3 sentiments that I thought worked well for these cards. 2 different hellos and a hugs, I think. Everything will be linked as it's relevant in the video description. But by picking 3 different word dies, I'm able to run them all through my machine at the same time. And this is another way that I'm using the scraps. Same thing here. I am stamping 3 different images from a Lawn Fawn stamp set, and some of the cards will have the raccoons, some will have the hedgehogs, some will have the squirrels, and I can stamp a lot more faster here with my MISTI. I'm using a pressure tool that I picked up recently to help get a good impression on my MISTI. What I used to do is like pull my sleeve down or take a cloth and help like press the front of the MISTI. But this pressure tool does something similar, which is a little bit less like oomph needed from you. So like, you know, if you have any sort of like shoulder pains or arthritis or something, a tool like this might be helpful, but I definitely don't think it's necessary. Anyway, like I said, I cut a bunch of the word dies, enough that each card could get 2 glued together so that it has a little bit more of like it stands out a little bit more. It's kind of like putting foam tape behind it, but I just cut 2 of them and glue it together. And I think that that's a lot less finicky than putting any sort of dimensional behind it. Then at a local craft store, many years ago at this point, they demonstrated how to use that Tim Holtz glassine paper that I showed, and I'll link it if it still exists. They showed that you could cut leaves from it and then crinkle it up, and it would look like fallen leaves, you know, and how they have that sort of like crinkly look outside in the fall. And I thought it was really cool. I think they did some inking with it too that made it look even better. But I do like the texture of this paper for fall leaves. And since I had picked some fallish looking paper, it's not explicitly fall. I'm not going to have like necessarily a happy fall on any of these or anything like that. But it has a sort of fall look because it has that one of the pattern papers is fallen leaves. I thought it would be a good opportunity to use these because when I saw this happen at the craft store, of course, I had to buy it. And I love fall. So I wanted to cut a bunch of them, and I did. I cut many of them, and then they sat in my craft stash for years, guys. Like, it was one of those things where like you buy this pack of sequins because you love it, but I had it forever. So anyway, I glued them behind, and I also popped up the animals. That's it for my cards today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you are interested in more crafting tutorials, be sure to subscribe to my channel. I will leave you links to the products that I can find in the video description below, as well as to my website where you can download this pattern. Thanks so much for watching. Have an awesome day.